There are places in the world where you can go to sleep without locking your door. Do you believe that? Not because you're reckless, but because no one even thinks about something bad happening. And there are also places where, with exactly the amount of Social Security benefits you currently receive, you're not only able to pay for housing, but also live with dignity, see a doctor without fearing the bill, and grow old without feeling like a burden. Today, you'll learn about 5 such places. If you turn off this video too early, there's a good chance you'll miss an option that, later on, when everything becomes more expensive, you'll wish you had known about sooner. 5. Japan, the land of cherry blossoms, where safety is not a privilege of the wealthy. There are places in the world where you can live to 80 years old and still leave your door unlocked every night, comfortably. You drop your wallet on a train, come back later, and it's still right where it was. It sounds like a made-up story, but that is actually a very normal part of daily life in Japan. Not the glamorous Tokyo, not the neon-lit neighborhoods from movies, but medium and small cities, where elderly people take evening walks with a calmness that leaves many Americans astonished. Japan is a strange paradox, one of the safest countries in the world, and at the same time a place many believe is too expensive to live. Yet it can become a retirement haven for people living solely on Social Security benefits. George, 72 years old, spent his entire life in California. He didn't come to Japan because he loved technology or pop culture. He came because he was tired of constantly feeling on guard. In Japan, he says, that anxiety disappeared so quickly that it took him months to get used to the idea of simply relaxing. He forgot his wallet on a train, came back later, and it was still there. He left his front door unlocked when stepping out to buy groceries, and his neighbors didn't see it as reckless. Here, safety isn't something you have to pay extra for. It's built directly into the way society functions. The cost of living is the next thing that surprises many people. Of course, Tokyo is not the answer. But once you move away from the expensive centers, life in Japan becomes far more manageable. Outside of Tokyo, the cost of living is only about 65% of that in the United States. A small, tidy, clean apartment, very much the Japanese style, can be rented at a level that Social Security benefits can still cover. There is no excess luxury here. Everything is designed to be sufficient, durable, and long-lasting. You don't pay for flashiness. You pay for precision. Trains arrive on time. Bills are transparent. There are no hidden fees waiting to shock you at the end of the month. Healthcare is where Japan truly shows why it has one of the highest life expectancies in the world. This isn't a system that overwhelms you. It's a system that reassures you. Going to the doctor is not a financial negotiation. Medication doesn't make you wonder whether you should delay treatment for a few more months. George says that the first time he went for a medical visit here, he realized something very different. No one made him feel like he was inconveniencing anyone. In Japan, old age is not treated as a burden. It's seen as a natural stage of life, one that society has already prepared itself to receive. That shows in people's patience, in the cleanliness of hospitals, and in care that is quiet, understated, but effective. From a residency standpoint, Japan is not lenient, but it is not closed off to retirees either. Long-term stay programs for people with stable income do exist, especially if you choose to live in less crowded areas. No one requires you to work. No one forces you to prove that you are still contributing in an economic sense. What they require is that you live orderly, respect the rules, and are able to support yourself. That is the price for the safety and stability Japan provides. Daily life here may feel too quiet for some people. No one speaks loudly. No one pushes or rushes. Everything moves steadily, almost meditatively. Then one spring morning, you step outside and see cherry blossoms covering the walkway. Beautiful, fragile, and short-lived. Perhaps that is also how the Japanese view old age. Not loud, not embellished, but worthy of being respected exactly as it is. Of course, Japan is not for everyone. The language is a real barrier. A culture built on discipline can feel restrictive to those used to absolute freedom. This is not a place to live for excitement. This is a place to live for peace. And if you accept that, Japan won't try to make you happy. It simply ensures that you are safe, properly cared for, and treated as a person of value until the end of your life. If, with the same social security income, one place gives you more freedom but less safety, and another gives you near absolute safety but demands discipline, which way of living would you choose for your later years? But if you want joy more than peace, the next place is what has made many people change their entire retirement plan. 4. Portugal, where Europe quietly apologizes to those who worked their entire lives. Tom is 67 years old this year. He isn't wealthy, has never sold a company, and doesn't have a substantial pension fund. The only thing he knows for certain he receives each month is Social Security. Back in the US, that income always made him feel like he was walking on a thin wire. One medical bill, one rent increase, and everything could tip over. Then Tom moved to Portugal, and the first strange thing he noticed wasn't the sunshine or the ocean, but the feeling that he no longer had to stay on guard against life itself. People often believe that to retire in Europe, you have to be rich, very rich, because Europe is associated with high costs, complicated healthcare, heavy taxes, and cities built only for tourists. But Portugal is a quiet paradox. Here, the same amount of money that once caused constant stress in the US is enough to live a life that feels comfortably ordinary. A small apartment in Porto or the Algarve region can be rented for around $600 to $800 a month. Not luxurious, but bright, peaceful, and most importantly, it doesn't consume what's left of your life. Total living costs are only about 60 to 65% of those in the United States, meaning that after paying rent, you still have room for a morning coffee, a decent lunch, and a few small pleasures, without having to scold yourself for spending too much. And the coffee here, honestly, is so cheap that if you grab it to go just to be quick, the server might look at you a little longer than usual, as if thinking, "You don't really need to rush like that." It's a small detail, but it says a lot about the pace of life here. No one pushes you. No one asks what you used to do for a living or how much you once earned. In Portugal, people are not valued by their past, but by how they show up in the present. Then there's healthcare, the thing most retirees worry about the most. In the US, every mention of a hospital makes your chest tighten a little, not necessarily because of illness, but because of the bill. In Portugal, that feeling fades fairly quickly. The public healthcare system functions reliably, and private healthcare is accessible, with costs that don't force you to recalculate your entire living budget over a single visit. Tom says that the first time he went to see a doctor here, no one asked what level of premium insurance he had. No one asked what he had done to deserve the care. They simply asked, "How are you feeling?" For someone who has lived long enough to understand that aging isn't as frightening as growing old in constant worry, that question carries far more weight. When it comes to visas, Portugal also doesn't try to make you feel like an outsider. Residency programs for people with passive income are designed to be relatively clear, with no requirement to work and no demand that you prove you are still useful to the economy. You simply need to show that you can support yourself, even if that's just Social Security plus a bit of savings. The core requirements are usually proof of stable income plus health insurance plus housing. And after living here for a while, you begin to notice something else: safety. This is one of the most peaceful countries in Europe. You can walk in the evening without constantly looking over your shoulder, and if someone approaches you, chances are they're just asking for directions or requesting help taking a photo. Of course, Portugal is not perfect. If you're used to a fast pace of life, used to everything being on time, by the book, this place will test your patience. Things move a bit slower, sometimes slow enough to frustrate newcomers. But after a while, you realize that this slowness is exactly what allows you to breathe evenly again. You're no longer racing against time. You're simply living alongside it. Portugal's greatest paradox is this: it doesn't promise you a better life. It simply stops making your life harder. And for someone living on Social Security, sometimes that alone is an enormous gift. If, with the same income, one place offers stress and another offers calm, which one would you choose to spend the rest of your life in? 3. Spain, where old age is not measured in years, but in joy. If you could live longer, but had to live alone, rushed and lonely, would you agree to that? That's not an easy question to answer, and it's precisely the question that leads many Americans, when they think about aging, to start looking toward Spain. Not because it's the cheapest place, not because it's the quietest, but because Spain offers a different proposition. Living longer is good, but living joyfully is what truly matters. There's something curious about it. Many Americans dream of Spain when they're young, but it's only as retirement approaches that they truly understand why they need this place. Warm weather year-round, sunlight that feels like a built-in part of daily life, and a pace so slow that you almost have to relearn how to not rush. In Spain, no one looks at you strangely if you sit in a cafe for 2 hours just to drink a small cup of coffee. No one asks what you do now that you're retired. They only ask if you'd like to stay a little longer. The cost of living is what makes this dream realistic. Outside of Madrid and Barcelona, life in Spain costs only about 65 to 70% of what it does in the United States. A modest apartment in Valencia, Seville, or in coastal towns can fall within the reach of Social Security income, especially if you're no longer chasing an American-style consumer lifestyle. Eating is not a luxury here. Fresh food, complete meals, and long lunches with family and friends, all of it is simply a normal part of life. You don't eat just to get full and move on. You eat to stay with the moment a little longer. Spain's public healthcare system is one of the highest rated in Europe, and what stands out is that it doesn't make older people feel like they're consuming society's resources. Hospitals are clean, doctors are patient, and healthcare is treated as a basic right, not a privilege. For many Americans, this is the first time they experience going to the doctor without worrying about costs before worrying about their health. You're not treated like a case file, but like a human being. What truly sets Spain apart from other places isn't just the climate or the cost of living, but the culture. This is a society built around family, community, and presence. Children, adults, and the elderly coexist in shared spaces, in long meals and conversations with no clear ending. Old age in Spain is not pushed to the margins. It's placed right at the center of social life. You're not expected to stay young to be accepted. You simply need to be present. Of course, there are trade-offs. You'll need to learn Spanish, at least enough to hold conversations, enough not to feel like an outsider. This isn't a place where you can live entirely inside an English-speaking bubble if you truly want to integrate. But that's also what gives many people a deeper sense of meaning. Learning a new language later in life, not for advancement, but for connection. Spain doesn't promise you absolute safety like Japan, nor does it offer the same sense of quiet as Portugal. What it gives instead is a different kind of wealth. Richness in relationships, richness in experiences, and richness in the feeling of living alongside others. This is a place where you don't just live longer, you live more joyfully if you allow yourself to slow down. So if your later years came down to just two choices, one place that is very safe but silent, and another that's a bit louder but full of laughter, which way of living would you choose for the rest of your life? 2. Thailand. The retirement capital of Asia, where money is no longer the center of life. If each month you have only a fixed amount of income, would you rather use it to fight your way through life, or to enjoy life? That's the question that keeps bringing Thailand back onto the list for many Americans, even after weighing every option again and again. Not because it's perfect, but because Thailand offers something rare. The feeling that you're living below your means, instead of constantly being stretched by costs. There's a reason Chiang Mai and Hua Hin are often called the retirement capitals of Asia. Life there moves so gently that you sometimes forget you ever had to scrutinize every bill. A clean, fully furnished apartment can be rented for around $400 to $600 a month. Not cramped living, but spacious enough to have your own space, quiet enough to hear the rain in the afternoon. Food is a different story altogether. It's inexpensive, easy to find, and always available. From street stalls to small restaurants where people start to remember your face after a few visits. For many, it's the first time in their lives they no longer have to ask themselves, is eating out today too expensive? Healthcare is what surprises many people the most, and it's also why they stay. Thailand has private healthcare systems that meet international standards, especially in Bangkok and major cities. Hospitals are modern, doctors are well-trained, and costs are only about 1/3 of those in the United States. More importantly, there's a feeling when you walk into a hospital. You're not treated like a walking bill. You're examined, things are explained to you, and you're cared for with respect. For someone living on Social Security, that brings a very real sense of relief, not the kind of reassurance that exists only on paper. From a legal standpoint, Thailand doesn't make retirees feel like outsiders. Retirement visas here are clear, well-established, and have been used by many before. You don't need to work, and you don't need to prove that you're wealthy. As long as you have stable income and follow the regulations, the door remains open. That clarity alone makes many people breathe easier, compared to constantly worrying about their residency status. Daily life in Thailand follows a different rhythm. Services here are designed to accommodate people, especially older adults. Everything feels a bit easier, from renting a place, ordering food, to asking for help. People smile more, speak more gently, and rarely make you feel like you're bothering anyone. Of course, the heat can be a challenge. Being far from family is also a real trade-off, and the culture is different, requiring you to learn how to adapt. But in return, you gain a life where money is no longer a daily obsession. Thailand doesn't promise absolute quiet or the cultural depth of Europe. What it offers instead is comfort. A sense that with the same Social Security income, you're not just surviving, but actually living comfortably, as long as you're willing to embrace a simpler, less showy way of life. And sometimes, simplicity is exactly what brings the greatest sense of relief in old age. If, with the same amount of money, one place forces you to calculate every day, while another allows you to exhale and slow down, which one would you choose to call home in the final years of your life? 1. Argentina, where life is unstable but people know how to live. If everything in your life has become too orderly, too predictable, too repetitive for decades, would you be willing to trade a bit of stability for the feeling that you're still truly alive? Argentina is the answer that makes many Americans pause and think. Not because it's the safest place, nor because it's the most peaceful, but because it offers a very different kind of freedom. Freedom from the obsession with controlling everything, even old age itself. Argentina doesn't promise you an easy life, but it gives you a lighter one, especially financially. The cost of living here is only about 40–45% of that in the United States, a figure that sounds almost unreal to anyone accustomed to rent, consuming their entire social security check. In Buenos Aires, you can rent a spacious apartment with high ceilings and large windows at a price that, in the US, would only get you a small room. Mendoza is slower, quieter, surrounded by mountains and vineyards, where life moves at a pace slow enough that you don't feel like time is chasing you. With the same social security income, in Argentina, you're not surviving. Your living healthcare is what surprises many people. Argentina has parallel public and private healthcare systems, with private care widely regarded for its quality doctors and reasonable costs. Seeing a doctor isn't a heavy financial decision. Medication doesn't force you to delay treatment out of fear of the bill. This isn't a perfect system, but it's enough for older adults to feel cared for, not measured. For those living on Social Security, that sense of enough matters far more than flash or polish. What truly sets Argentina apart isn't the numbers, but the people. This is an outward-facing, emotional society that doesn't hide old age. People talk a lot, argue a lot, laugh loudly, and invite you to the table as if you've known each other for years. Old age in Argentina isn't minimized or pushed aside. It's placed right in the middle of life, in long dinners, inexpensive but good wine, and conversations without a goal. You don't have to stay young to be accepted. You just have to show up. Of course, there are trade-offs you can't ignore. Argentina's economy is unstable. The currency fluctuates. Rules sometimes change faster than you can keep up with. You need flexibility, and you need to learn not to panic when things don't go according to plan. But within that instability, many people discover a paradox. When you can't control everything, you stop trying to control yourself. Tension that's built up over years begins to dissolve. You learn to live day by day instead of constantly worrying about next month, next year. Argentina is not for those who need absolute certainty. It's for those who have gone far enough in life to understand this. Safety doesn't come only from systems, but also from accepting that you can't control everything. For people like that, Argentina offers a rare reward, the feeling that you are still living, not just waiting. If, with the same Social Security income, one place gives you stability but feels closed off, and another is more unstable but full of human warmth, would you choose absolute peace of mind or a life that still vibrates with feeling? Places where you don't wake up every morning worrying whether your money will last until the end of the month. Places where old age isn't treated as a burden, but as a natural part of life. You don't become poorer when you retire. You're simply living in a place that's too expensive to grow old. The 5 countries you've just seen are not paradise. They aren't perfect, but they offer something very rare. The right to slow down without fear. And sometimes, just knowing that you have an exit, a plan B, is enough to make the present feel far easier to breathe in. So if one day you're forced to choose, stay in a familiar place that's becoming harder to live in, or leave in exchange for peace of mind, what would you choose for the rest of your life?